Some warnings don't come as disasters. They come as unease, a tightening in your spirit, a quiet resistance you can't explain. You feel it when a certain influence enters your life, when a direction looks attractive but leaves you restless, when something keeps pulling at you, but your peace keeps pulling away. That's not confusion, that's discernment. God does not always shout. For the chosen ones, he warns early. This message is not for everyone. It's for those who sense that something marked by M has been testing their obedience, their focus or their loyalty. Not because it looks evil, but because it looks reasonable. Pay attention. 1. God warns before he removes. God is merciful, but he is also precise. People like to talk about God's mercy, but they often ignore his accuracy. God does not act randomly. He does not remove things from your life suddenly, without first speaking to your heart. Before he removes a person, a path, or a season, he sends a warning. Quiet, subtle, internal, not dramatic, but unmistakable if you are paying attention. The warning does not usually come through chaos. It comes through disturbance of peace. Something that once felt neutral now feels heavy. Something that once excited you now leaves you restless. You find yourself unsettled without a clear logical reason. That is not weakness. That is awareness. Scripture shows this pattern again and again. Noah was warned before the flood. God did not wake him up to destruction. He spoke to him while the skies were still clear. The warning came long before the rain. Lot was warned before destruction fell on Sodom. Angels came before fire. Joseph was warned through dreams before betrayal, not after. In every case, God gave insight before impact. This matters because many people assume warnings arrive as obvious danger. They don't. They arrive as information, as preparation, as internal resistance. If God is warning you about emit, it means removal has not happened yet. That alone should sober you. It means you are still in a window of grace. It means the door is still open for obedience without damage. Time is still available. Once removal happens, the lesson becomes more painful. God warns first, so you don't have to learn through loss. Chosen ones often mishandle this phase. They talk themselves out of discernment. They confuse spiritual sensitivity with anxiety. They say things like, maybe I'm overthinking, or maybe I'm being dramatic, or I don't want to judge. But discernment is not judgment. Discernment is perception. And God does not give perception without reason. Here is the uncomfortable truth. When God warns you, he often does it quietly, so you can choose him freely. Loud warnings force obedience. Quiet warnings test loyalty. God does not disturb peace without purpose. He does not plant unrest to confuse you. When your peace is disturbed consistently around the same person, the same direction, the same opportunity, or the same mindset, something is being revealed. Not everything that unsettles you is evil, but everything that unsettles you is information. Chosen ones must learn to respect early signals. The problem is that early warnings are easy to ignore because nothing has gone wrong yet. There is no visible consequence, no explosion, no collapse. Everything still works. That's why people stay too long. They wait for proof instead of trusting perception. But God does not warn when things fall apart. He warns while they still look intact. This is where many people fail the test. They demand logical justification for spiritual discomfort. They want evidence. They want validation from others. They want a reason that sounds good out loud. But discernment rarely sounds impressive. It sounds simple. Something is off. This doesn't sit right. I feel pulled away. That's it. When a name, a mindset, a motive, or a movement keeps unsettling your spirit, that is not coincidence. Patterns matter. Repetition matters. God repeats warnings because he respects your choice. He doesn't force you. He reminds you. If you ignore the warning, God doesn't stop being merciful. But mercy changes form. What was once a whisper becomes a lesson. What was once a nudge becomes friction. What was once an exit becomes a consequence. This is why discernment is a responsibility, not a gift to admire. God does not reveal things to make you feel special. He reveals things to make you obedient. Chosen ones are often warned early because they are trusted with more. That's the part people don't like to hear. Early warning is not favoritism, it's accountability. God holds you to a higher standard because He placed more in you. That's why you feel things others don't. That's why you can't enjoy certain things without inner conflict. That's why ignoring warnings costs you more than it costs others. You are not being punished, you are being protected. If God is warning you about M, do not rush to define it publicly. You don't need to label it yet. You don't need to expose it. You don't need to confront anyone. Warnings are first for alignment, not confrontation. They are meant to adjust your direction, not announce your superiority. The question is not, is this bad? The question is this pulling me closer to obedience or further from it? God warns before He removes because removal is costly. Separation hurts. Change destabilizes. God would rather you move willingly than be forced by collapse. Pay attention to what keeps disturbing your peace. Pay attention to what requires you to silence your convictions. Pay attention to what you keep justifying instead of praying about. That is where the warning lives. And if you are wise, you will listen while grace is still speaking quietly. 2. M looks safe, not sinful. The mistake most people make is assuming that danger always looks dark. It doesn't. For the chosen ones, the greatest threat rarely arrives as obvious sin. It arrives dressed as reason, as comfort, as something that almost fits your calling, but quietly reshapes it. That is why M is dangerous. Not because it looks evil, but because it looks acceptable. If M were clearly wrong, you would have walked away already. There would be no inner conflict, no debate, no hesitation. But God is not warning you about something clearly destructive. He is warning you about something subtly misaligned. Nave feels safe. It feels familiar. It feels justified. It even feels productive. That's why you defend it. That's why you explain it away. That's why you say things like, "It's not that bad," or "At least it's not what I used to do," or "Everyone else is doing it." That language should alarm you. God does not measure danger the way humans do. Humans look at outcomes. God looks at direction. Humans ask, "Does this harm me right now?" God asks, "Where does this lead over time?" Many people ruin their future not by choosing evil, but by choosing what is almost right. Scripture repeatedly shows that compromise is more destructive than rebellion. Rebellion is loud and short-lived. Compromise is quiet and long-term. It reshapes your standards slowly. It trains your conscience to do what it once rejected. It doesn't break you immediately. It bends you gradually. That's why M doesn't feel threatening. It feels reasonable. M may not demand that you abandon faith outright. It may only ask you to delay obedience, to soften convictions, to stay silent when truth should be spoken, to adjust your values just this once. But calling does not erode all at once. It erodes by agreement. Chosen ones often struggle here because they confuse peace with permission. Something can feel calm and still be wrong. Calmness is not the same as alignment. Many paths are smooth at the beginning. That does not mean God is in them. If M requires you to negotiate your standards, it is already costing you something important. You may not see the cost yet, but you feel it. That subtle unease, that internal friction, that sense that something is being exchanged. And here's the hard truth. The enemy does not need to destroy you if he can distract you. It may not pull you away dramatically. It may simply slow you down, delay you, keep you busy enough to feel productive, but disconnected enough to feel dull. That is often enough to neutralize a calling. This is why chosen ones feel restless around certain opportunities, even when they look good on paper. The numbers make sense. The logic checks out. The approval is there. But the spirit resists. That resistance is not fear. It is accuracy. God never needs you to compromise truth to receive provision. He never asks you to betray conviction to gain favor. If something demands silence where obedience requires clarity, it is not from him. Mem might even look like growth, more influence, more access, more comfort. But growth that costs alignment is not progress. It's exchange. Pay attention to what M asks of you over time. Does it strengthen discipline or weaken it? Does it sharpen conviction or blur it? Does it draw you toward obedience or make obedience inconvenient? Most people wait for M to reveal itself as harmful before acting. That's too late. By then, attachment has already formed. Identity has already adjusted. Justifications have already settled in. God warns early because he sees the end from the beginning. Chosen ones must learn this. What feels safe can still be disobedient. What feels comfortable can still be misaligned. What feels normal can still be wrong for you. Your calling is specific. Your assignment is narrow. You don't get the luxury of general alignment. You need precision. Imp is not dangerous because it is sinful. It is dangerous because it is close enough to truth to confuse you, and confusion is how focus is lost. God is not asking you to fear men. He is asking you to discern it, to stop measuring it by appearance and start measuring it by direction, to stop asking, can I live with this, and start asking, does this honor what God is building in me? Not everything that looks safe is sent by God, and not everything God warns you about will look wrong at first. That is why this lesson matters. 3. Chosen ones are warned earlier than others. This is where many people get confused and start doubting themselves. They look around and see others moving freely, celebrating, advancing, and enjoying what they themselves feel uneasy about. And the question forms quietly in the mind, if this is wrong, why does it seem to toke for them? The answer is simple, but uncomfortable. You are not held to the same standard. Chosen ones do not get the luxury of delayed consequences. God deals with them sooner because he intends to entrust them with more. Early warning is not punishment, it is responsibility. In Scripture, the closer someone is to assignment, the stricter the correction. David was corrected quickly. Moses was held accountable severely for small disobedience. Peter was confronted openly. Others around them made worse mistakes and tended on without immediate consequence. That wasn't favor toward others. That was trust placed on the chosen. God corrects who he intends to use. This is why you feel conviction where others feel comfort. Why you sense resistance where others feel excitement. Why what energizes them drains you. You are not imagining it. You are being calibrated. Chosen ones are warned early because damage costs them more. A small compromise does not stay small when the calling is large. What might delay someone else will derail you. What others can recover from quickly will scar you deeply. That's why God doesn't wait with you. You might notice that once you cross a certain spiritual threshold, life becomes less forgiving. Excuses stop working. Inner unrest appears faster. Conviction sharpens. This is not God becoming harsh. This is God becoming precise. Precision increases as responsibility increases. Many chosen ones struggle because they keep comparing their experience to people who are not called the same way. They say, but they're doing fine, or nothing bad is happening to them. That comparison will destroy discernment. God doesn't measure you against others. He measures you against assignment. If God is warning you about make, it is because M intersects with your future in a way it does not intersect with theirs. What is neutral for them is costly for you. What is optional for them is forbidden for you. What is harmless for them is a distraction for you. This is one of the loneliest realities of being chosen. You have to walk away from things you can't fully explain to people who don't feel what you feel. You look irrational, overly cautious, extreme. But obedience has never looked reasonable to the uncalled. Early warnings are God's way of saying, I need you clear. Clarity is not about intelligence. It's about alignment. God protects clarity aggressively in chosen ones because confusion slows execution. A distracted mind cannot carry divine responsibility. This is why God does not always give you the same grace windows He gives others. He shortens your margin for error. He tightens correction. He interrupts sooner, not to limit you but to preserve what He plans to do through you. If you keep ignoring early warnings, God will still be faithful, but the lessons will become heavier, not because He is angry, but because the assignment demands readiness. Chosen ones are not punished more. They are prepared more. This lesson requires maturity to accept. Many people resent God here. They say, why am I always corrected? Or why can't I just enjoy things like everyone else? The answer is uncomfortable but honest, because your life is not just about you. If you want the weight of calling, you must accept the weight of correction. God warns you early so you don't have to be repaired later. If M keeps triggering conviction while others celebrate it, don't let that confuse you. Let it inform you. God is not asking you to judge them. He is asking you to obey Him. Chosen ones are not led by comparison. They are led by conviction, and conviction, when ignored, becomes consequence. That's why God speaks sooner to you than to others. 4. M is a test of loyalty, not love. This is where most people misread the situation. They assume God is asking about affection, attachment, or preference. He isn't. God is not concerned with what you like. He is concerned with who you trust. Every major calling is tested at the level of loyalty, not through open rebellion, but through divided allegiance. God does not compete loudly. He watches quietly to see where your obedience goes when pressure is subtle. M is not the reward. N is the question. Throughout Scripture, God tests loyalty before He releases responsibility. Abraham was not tested with something evil. He was tested with something good, something promised, something loved. Isaac was not sinful. He was significant. And that is why the test mattered. God asked Abraham to place obedience above attachment. Not because God wanted Isaac gone, but because God wanted Abraham unbound. Chosen ones often fail to recognize this. They think tests come through obvious temptation. But the deepest tests come through what you care about, through what you protect, through what you justify when conviction rises. M may not be wrong in itself, but if it competes with obedience, it becomes a problem. God is not asking you to hate it. He is asking you to place Him above it. This is why emotional attachment clouds discernment. You start defending what God is questioning. You start explaining what God is exposing. You shift from listening to negotiating. Negotiation is the first sign of divided loyalty. God never asks, do you love this? He asks, will you obey me if I ask you to release it? Chosen ones are defined not by what they attract, but by what they surrender. Many people chase favor. Few people pass tests. If M makes obedience feel costly, uncomfortable, or delayed, then M is functioning as a loyalty test. God is watching not to trap you, but to refine you. Tests reveal alignment. They show what truly holds authority in your life. Here is the hard truth. Most people avoid God will not elevate someone whose loyalty is divided. Calling requires clarity. Authority requires submission. You cannot carry weight while being pulled in two directions. This is why God does not always explain his tests. If he explained them fully, obedience would be transactional. He allows tension so trust can be proven. If you find yourself saying, "But what about this?" or "just this once," or "I'll deal with it later," you are not wrestling with love. You are wrestling with loyalty. Chosen ones often want confirmation that letting go will lead to something better. God does not always give that confirmation up front. He gives instruction. Faith follows instruction, not outcome. The question is not whether M feels meaningful. The question is whether it outranks obedience. God is not trying to take from you. He is trying to see if he can trust you with more. What you cling to now may be the very thing limiting what he wants to release through you. Loyalty is proven in private decisions. In moments where no one sees your obedience, where letting go earns no applause, where obedience feels lonely, that is where calling is forged. If God is warning you about Kumar, don't ask how to keep it safely. Ask whether you are willing to release it completely if he asks. Because chosen ones are not chosen for comfort. They are chosen for faithfulness. And faithfulness is tested long before promotion ever comes. 5. Delaying obedience strengthens the attachment. This is where the situation becomes dangerous. Not because of what M is, but because of how long it stays. Time does not keep things neutral. Time either weakens attachment or deepens it. And when God has already warned you, time works against you, not for you. Obedience delayed is not obedience in progress. It is resistance wearing a calm face. At first, the warning is light. A check in the spirit. A quiet discomfort. A sense that something needs to change. God speaks gently because he expects maturity. He assumes you will move when you hear him. But when you hesitate, something subtle happens inside you. You begin to adapt. You start finding language to justify staying. You frame delay as wisdom. You call hesitation patience. You say you're waiting for clarity when, in reality, clarity has already been given. This is how attachment forms, not through desire alone, but through repeated postponement of obedience. The longer M remains after the warning, the more emotional weight it gains. You invest energy, you invest identity, you invest hope. And once something holds emotional weight, letting go feels like loss instead of obedience. This is why God warns early. Early obedience is clean. Late obedience is painful. Chosen ones often believe that waiting will make obedience easier. It doesn't. Waiting makes obedience more expensive. What could have been released quietly now requires sacrifice. What could have been left calmly now demands grief. What could have been ended with clarity now ends with confusion. God never intended that. Every time you ignore a warning, your conscience adjusts. Not dramatically, but gradually. The first time you resist, it feels wrong. The second time, it feels uncomfortable. The third time, it feels normal. This is not because God stopped speaking. It is because you trained yourself not to respond. That's how spiritual sensitivity dulls. Gains power not because it is strong, but because you stayed when you were supposed to move. Attachment is not created by affection alone. It is created by time spent in disobedience. This is why some people feel trapped by things they once could have walked away from easily. The chains were not there at the beginning. They were formed slowly by hesitation. Chosen ones must understand this clearly. God does not reveal things for observation. He reveals things for response. Discernment without action becomes self-deception. You start feeling spiritual because you see the issue, but nothing changes because you refuse to act. God is not impressed by awareness. He responds to obedience. When you delay, you also delay momentum. Direction stalls. Prayer feels heavy. Clarity fades. Not because God left, but because alignment was broken. You cannot walk confidently while resisting instruction. This is where many chosen ones start blaming themselves unnecessarily. They say, something feels off in my life. Without realizing it traces back to a warning they postponed. Disobedience doesn't always produce chaos. Sometimes it produces stagnation, and stagnation is easier to tolerate than pain, which is why people stay stuck. But understand this. God's warnings are acts of love. Ignoring them doesn't cancel the calling, but it complicates the path. God will still be faithful, but what could have been simple becomes layered with unnecessary struggle. If God is warning you about delay is not neutral. It is costly. The longer you wait, the harder release becomes. The heavier the emotional toll, the deeper the internal conflict. Obedience today is lighter than obedience tomorrow. Chosen ones who move quickly, preserve clarity, they stay light. They remain flexible. They avoid entanglement. That is not weakness. That is wisdom. God is not asking you to rush recklessly. He is asking you to respond faithfully. You already know what needs to be done. The discomfort you feel now is not fear. It is tension created by delay, and that tension will not leave until obedience happens. The sooner you act, the less you lose. That is the truth most people learn too late. 6. God does not warn without providing a way out. This is where fear tries to take over the mind. When God warns you about something, the first reaction is often anxiety. You start asking, if I let this go, then what? You imagine loss, emptiness, uncertainty, and fear tells you that obedience will leave you stranded. That fear is a lie. God does not expose something in your life without already preparing an exit. He never reveals a problem without also creating provision. The way out may not look attractive. It may not feel comfortable. It may not come with immediate reassurance, but it exists. Chosen ones struggle here because they want to see the replacement before releasing the attachment. God rarely works that way. If He showed you everything in advance, obedience would be a transaction, not trust. Faith would be reduced to calculation. Scripture shows this clearly. The Red Sea did not part when the Israelites analyzed their options. It parted when they stepped forward. Abraham did not see provision for Isaac until he lifted the knife. Peter did not walk on water by understanding the physics. He walked because he obeyed the call. God reveals the way out in motion, not in hesitation. If God is warning you about the exit may already be present in subtle form. A door that doesn't excite you, a path that feels quieter, a choice that looks smaller. Often the way out doesn't feel like victory. It feels like loss at first. That is because obedience often strips identity before it builds capacity. Chosen ones must understand this. God does not rescue you from consequences you choose to stay in. He offers escape before entanglement, but you have to take it. Many people miss the way out because they are looking for confirmation instead of instruction. They want peace before moving, but peace comes after alignment, not before. God is not obligated to make obedience emotionally comfortable. He is committed to making it purposeful. The way out is rarely dramatic. It is usually simple. Stop engaging, step back, say no, walk away quietly, release without announcement. Obedience does not require explanation. This is where pride often interferes. People don't leave because they fear how it will look. They fear misunderstanding. They fear being wrong. But obedience is not about saving face. It's about saving direction. God does not ask you to know how everything will work out. He asks you to trust that He already knows. If M feels like a trap, but you can't see a clear alternative, understand this: clarity is not the same as comfort. The way out may lead you into temporary uncertainty, but uncertainty with God is safer than certainty without Him. Chosen ones often underestimate how quickly God restores what obedience costs. What feels like loss today becomes protection tomorrow. What feels like sacrifice now becomes clarity later. But that only happens if you move. Staying where God warned you to leave does not preserve safety. It delays rescue. God will not force you through the exit. He will point to it. And if you sense an invitation to step away, step back, or let go, that is not abandonment. That is guidance. God is not removing support. He is redirecting alignment. The way out may require humility. It may require silence. It may require trusting God without telling anyone else what you're doing. But it exists. God does not warn to leave you trapped. He warns because freedom is still available. The moment you choose obedience, the path becomes clearer, not because circumstances change immediately, but because alignment restores vision, and once vision returns, fear loses its grip. That is how God leads the chosen ones out. 7. Obedience now prevents pain later. This is the lesson most people only understand in hindsight. By the time they see it clearly, the cost has already been paid. God's warnings are quiet, but consequences are loud. What He tries to spare you from gently today will confront you forcefully tomorrow if ignored. Obedience feels heavy in the moment because it asks you to move without guarantees. Pain feels heavier later because it arrives with regret. One is chosen, the other is endured. God never warns you to control you. He warns you to protect you. The discomfort you feel now is not punishment. It is prevention. When you obey early, you avoid conflicts you were never meant to fight, losses you were never meant to grieve, and lessons you were never meant to learn the hard way. Chosen ones often believe they can manage consequences through strength or intelligence. They think they can endure it, recover from it, or fix it later. That belief has delayed more destinies than failure ever has. God does not warn because you are weak. He warns because some costs are unnecessary. Early obedience keeps life lighter. It preserves momentum. It protects clarity. When you move quickly at God's instruction, you avoid emotional entanglement, spiritual dullness, and prolonged confusion. You don't carry weight that doesn't belong to you. Delayed obedience, on the other hand, always multiplies the price. What could have been a simple release becomes a painful separation. What could have been a quiet decision becomes a crisis. What could have been a quiet decision becomes a long detour. God does not shout to warn you. He whispers because He expects trust. When whispers are ignored, life speaks louder. Not because God is angry, but because reality has no filter. This is why some people say, "I wish I listened earlier." That sentence is the sound of pain teaching what discernment tried to prevent. Chosen ones who obey early look extreme to others. They walk away suddenly. They change direction quietly. They end things without drama. But later they are the ones spared from public collapse, emotional exhaustion, and spiritual burnout. Obedience now is an act of wisdom, not fear. It is not about running away. It is about aligning forward. God never calls you to obey in order to shrink you. He calls you to obey in order to preserve what He is building in you. If God is warning you about, He is not trying to ruin something. He is trying to prevent something from ruining you. The pain you avoid by obeying early is invisible. No one will congratulate you for the disasters you never faced. No one will see the battles you never had to fight. But heaven sees it, and your future benefits from it. Chosen ones must learn to trust prevention over recovery. Healing is powerful, but avoidance is wiser. God does not need you to prove your strength by enduring what He already told you to leave. If you feel pressure to decide, that pressure is not panic, it is urgency. The window for clean obedience does not stay open forever. It narrows quietly. This is the moment that separates those who hear God from those who obey Him. Obedience now protects peace later. Obedience now preserves clarity later. Obedience now prevents pain later. You have already been warned. What you do next will decide whether this message remains guidance or becomes a lesson learned the hard way. This was never about guessing who or what M is. You already know. God does not warn to confuse. He warns to align. If something kept pressing on your spirit while you listened, that wasn't emotion, that was recognition. Chosen ones are not identified by how much they endure. They are identified by how quickly they obey. You don't need more signs. You don't need more confirmation. You don't need to explain your decision to people who don't feel the weight you feel. What God is asking you to release now is small compared to what it will cost you to keep it. Silence is sometimes obedience. Walking away quietly is sometimes faith. Letting go without closure is sometimes protection. If you move now, you move with clarity. If you delay, you move with consequence. God is warning you because He still trusts you. He is speaking because the door is still open. He is calling you because your future still matters. Pay attention and move while grace is still speaking softly.